Purdue is back after a big top 10 road win over Nebraska. This is Purdue's first potential revenge game for either side this year as they set to take on Iowa Hawkeye. The Iowa Hawkeyes, a team they've already seen this year earlier in a game in which Purdue won 79-72. This is an Iowa team coming off a rather inexplicable loss to a semi-floundering Maryland team that maybe picking up a little bit. I've won a couple games here in the last couple weeks or so, but regardless, still a bad loss for an Iowa team that is trending towards being a safe tournament team. This Iowa team is still ranked in the top 25 on KenPom. This will be a quad one road game in Carver Hawkeye Arena. How do you see this matchup trending for Purdue? Do you think it's similar in nature at all to that 79-72 game in Mackey Arena?
I think it could be, but there were several things we identified as like matchup advantages in the Purdue Iowa game the first time that didn't really play out that way in the first meeting. And I'm curious to see how things play out this time. Are they going to say the same? Is Purdue going to attack some of Iowa's vulnerabilities a little bit more? I mean, Iowa's a pretty poor interior defense. They don't have a ton of rim protection. They foul a lot. And Purdue, I mean, Trey Coffin, Ryan Oscar, Clough, and Daniel Jacobson did combine for 29 points. But the story of that game for both sides really was shooting. Both teams shot above 40% from three, and it became a little bit of a three-point shooting contest, though Purdue's guards made them pay in the paint rather than the bigs. So this will be interesting to see how each team adjusts. On the Purdue defensive side of things, this was the game that spawned all those fan arguments surrounding good looks versus contested looks and role players going nuclear from three, and really started maybe Purdue's defensive woes they had for about a month and a half there. A lot of this came to fruition in that first Iowa game.
Yeah, I mean, this was like the ultimate narratives game as far as it went in Purdue circles. You had the weird Trey Kaufman Ren play where it looked like he didn't run back on a fast break. That's obviously since been changed. Like we've seen plays of him running back on fast breaks ever since. I don't think that's been a reoccurring problem. I think this second matchup with Iowa is a good chance for Purdue to see whether or not they've kind of gotten over the hump. I think the defense looked a lot better against Nebraska. I think the defense looked a lot better against Oregon and Maryland as well. And, we'll see if that trend is true. I think this is the perfect game for that, because as we talked about, this is the OG, what's a good look, what's an open look, what's wide open, what's not wide open type deal. And this is the same Iowa team with the same role players, and they're playing at home now. So I think if they get the wide open looks that you and I think both agree that they got in the first matchup, this is a dangerous Iowa team. But think if this Purdue defense is flying around like they were against Nebraska and closing out the way they were, and elite defense from CJ Cox on a primary perimeter option like Bennett Sturts, who that'll likely be the matchup. I think this Purdue team wins handily because I think they have the personnel to beat this Iowa team if they execute like that on defense.
Yeah, this game, the story of the first Purdue Iowa game is Bennett Sturts versus Braden Smith, arguably the two best point guards in the Big Ten, with apologies to Jeremy Fears. And they put on a show. Braden Smith did not score in the first half in that game, but he finished with 16 points, 8 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals. It was phenomenal in the second half, really powered Purdue's comeback win. If you recall, Iowa did have the lead after the first half in that game in Mackey Arena. Meanwhile, Sturts had 19 points, 4 assists, and 3 rebounds. This was a duel of two of the best all-around point guards from a scoring, passing, even rebounding perspective. Feels like nightly both of them are good for a lot of triple-double watch tweets, and I don't know how many, I don't know if either will ever actually get one, but that's going to be the story of this game too. Both offenses are pretty content to play things slow, run their offense, and let their elite point guards kind of dice up the opposing defenses. And this game, like the first one, is going to come down to which offense can execute better.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And I think the one thing that's important to note, I don't know if it's important to note, but another thing that we haven't mentioned yet is how close the rebounding battle was in the first matchup. Purdue won the rebounding battle 26-23, but that's very slight. And this is an Iowa team that the rebounding numbers have slipped, especially in conference, especially as they've started to play better front courts. And this is now trending towards a team that is closer to like the 150s nationally in rebounding than they are to like the top 10, which is about what Purdue's at in the rebounding category. And I think with that, that is something you could expect to change, I think, in this matchup. I think this is a Purdue front court that you just watched dominate, in my opinion, a better front court in Nebraska's on the glass. And I mean, they dominated Nebraska's front court in ways that, as Fred Hoiberg said, he'd never seen before. And so I think if you get a similar level rebounding performance, which I think is a possibility against an Iowa front court that doesn't have a ton of top end size, like you could see a wide margin for Purdue, especially if the shots go down at the rate they did in the first matchup.
I agree. This is going to be a huge, huge rebounding test for Purdue. Um, you mentioned I was a pretty average rebounding team. It's not really exceptional one way or another on their team sheet, which should be a huge advantage for a Purdue team that absolutely dominates the boards, at least when they want to. And the want to is going to be big here. Purdue should have the size advantage. Their bigs are better than Iowa's bigs. If they can get good positioning, especially on the offensive glass, and get extra possessions for Purdue team, that shooting better than Iowa in Carver Hawkeye Arena is always a tough ask, especially against this Iowa team. So if Purdue wants to win this game, getting extra possessions by taking care of the ball and collecting offensive rebounds could be pretty big for their hopes. One other thing I want to mention, you mentioned it was a weird Trey Kaufman-Wren game. The guards for Purdue really were able to get downhill and attack the basket against Iowa in the first game. Braden Smith did not attempt a three-point attempt in that game because they were playing drop coverage and coming over on screens. So he was just getting to his mid-range or getting all the way to the rim and really punishing Iowa for their defensive coverage. And I'm curious if they try and defend him a little bit differently this time, because as dangerous as Braden is as a three-point shooter, the worst thing for a defense is to get Braden Smith with 2 feet in the paint and options around him. And I'm curious if they're going to try and adjust their defensive coverage at all. And then B, can that continue? Can Braden Smith, Fletcher Loyer, CJ Cox, even the bench guards like Jakari Harris and Omar Meyer, when they're in the game, can they get downhill and put a lot of pressure on the rim? Or is this a game where Purdue says, we're bigger than you inside, let's let Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman-Wren go to work?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is we see a carryover from the last game and we see we're bigger than you inside. We can beat you up inside. We can beat you up on the block and we can beat you up on the glass mentality out of this front court, because I'd love to see this front court string together 2 good games. I mean, we haven't seen good Clough in back-to-back games in quite some time, and he was phenomenal. Earned a KenPom MVP in the Nebraska game. It would be big for kind of signaling like he's back and the front court has figured some things out if he followed that up with a performance of what I think he should do to the Iowa front court most times, which is have a strong performance, have a double-digit rebound game. I mean, this is an Iowa front court that Trey Kaufman-Wren and Oscar Clough combined for 6 rebounds against in the last matchup. They're better rebounders than that. This is an Iowa team that's not good enough on the glass that they should be able to keep those 2 to 6 rebounds total between the two of them. And this is kind of almost a respect game for the Purdue front court, where it's like these guys kind of outplayed you the first time. Here's your chance to get your get back and prove that was an anomaly. You're better than those guys. Like, go earn it. And I think this front court can, and I would love to see it. I mean, I do think that, like you mentioned, Braden Smith got downhill. This team doesn't have a rim protector in Iowa, and not only that, but they're not the most athletic bigs in the entire world. And I think Braden realized that, and there was an emphasis on getting downhill. And it wouldn't shock me at all to see the guards get downhill a lot. This could be a big Jakari Harris game for that exact reason. I think this Purdue offense can replicate how they attack this Iowa defense the first time, and I think they can change some things defensively and on the glass to kind of maybe even tilt that matchup a little bit more in their favor.
Yeah, I mean, they're not on the bigs in 18 minutes. Daniel Jacobson had 7 and 9 with a block against Iowa in the last game. And he was Purdue's best rebounder by far in that game, which is maybe not great for Purdue generally if Daniel Jacobson is your best rebounder in any given matchup. But he really stepped up where Clough and Kaufman-Wren struggled. He only played 5 minutes. He was essentially benched against Nebraska. largely because I think of how good Oscar Clough was rather than anything he himself was doing wrong. But even when Clough did breather in crunch time, you saw Painter go to the Trey Kaufman Wren Jack Benner front court rather than playing Jacobson. So this could be a big bounce back spot for him. See if he can get back on track against an Iowa team that he performed very well against last time. But you mentioned the defense. That's probably the last thing to hit on here before we move to predictions. Um, Purdue's defense, until their most recent 3-game win streak, was really going through it. They've been playing pretty poorly for a while and then started to lose games, which brought a lot more focus on the performance of that defense. And this Iowa game was a great example of that. Iowa was getting wide open 3-point shots whenever they wanted them. And a lot of them were from their role players and lower volume 3-point shooters, but those are still shots that the Iowa offense is looking to generate. And so Purdue is going to have its work cut out for it. They should have a big advantage on the defensive glass. Now, that didn't pan out exactly the way we thought it would in the first matchup, but in theory, they should have an advantage on the glass. It's going to be important, though, for them to not let Iowa get hot. This game is not in Mackey Arena, which is a little bit more comfortable for this Purdue team that's going to be on the road, hostile environment. If the Iowa offense starts hitting shots and getting going, it's going to get pretty tough on Purdue, I think. In a spot where they really need to win. So no matter what defensive coverage they're playing, I'm sure Purdue will try out something we're not expecting. Guys got to execute, and they can't let shooters get free, which was happening too often in the first matchup.
Yeah, I love your point on execution because, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what went wrong in the first matchup. But I think we have correctly analyzed this game quite a bit at this point. If you guys are looking for more player-by-player specific roster breakdown of Iowa, we do have an earlier preview up on the channel that has some of that more in-depth player-by-player personnel breakdown. But on that note, we will move into predictions. KenPom has this game a 72-71 win for Purdue. Super low possession game, projecting 62 possessions. These are two of the slowest teams in the country, two of the best point guards in the country. What some people consider to be two of the best coaches in the country. And this will be a tough matchup. How do you think this goes? Do you think Purdue ends up pulling this out? It's essentially a pick'em game.
I think Purdue wins, though I don't think it'll be easy at all. Iowa is coming off a really tough loss to Maryland, but they had won, I believe, 8 in a row before that, or 7 in a row before that. The last game they lost before the Maryland game was the Purdue game. This was a game. This was an Iowa team that was really trending in the right direction. They had some great wins in that stretch, including Indiana and USC. So no like super high quality opponents, but they were taking care of business and beating some other teams in like the upper half of the Big Ten, let's say. And it's an Iowa team, and I made this point in the first preview for Iowa back when they played in January, but Iowa's a team that wants to play very similarly to the way Purdue wants to play on offense, like slowing things down, leaving the ball in their point guards' hands, running their actions, running their sets, and finding the best looks, even if that takes a while. And the first meeting between Purdue and Iowa had 64 possessions, one of the lowest possession games Purdue played all season. I expect that to continue. But at the end of the day, Purdue should have a pretty sizable rebounding advantage. And if you're asking me who I trust more, Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer to execute, or Bennett Sturts and Kyle Combs, I'm gonna side with Fletch and with Braden. Me, Purdue by like 4 in a game where they probably have to score a couple late buckets, take back the lead, or to seal it. I'll say 74-70.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, I think this Purdue team gets the win. This Iowa team definitely is a tough matchup, but I look at this Iowa team, and I think we disagree a little bit on the recent stretch. I did look; it was 6. They only played 2 teams inside of the top 50 on KenPom, in Indiana and Washington. Beat up on Rutgers and Oregon and Northwestern a little bit in that stretch. I look at this Iowa team, and I see a team that has yet to beat an opponent that is rated higher than them on KenPom. And I look at this roster, and I see a bunch of guys who I have some respect for, and I think they're a good composition. But I think at the end of the day, this team just doesn't have the top-end talent next to Bennett Sturts to beat the deepest team and best teams in this league. And I think that shows up again in this game. I think that's kind of what you saw a little bit in the first game. I think you saw Iowa outplay Purdue for large stretches of that game. And it wasn't the greatest game from Purdue, I think. And at the end of the day, I think the Purdue depth and execution wore down this Iowa team, but they play a style that's not really conducive to generating upsets. I mean, it can at times, but I think when you're talking about a Purdue team and you're talking about wanting to just out execute people, you're not going to out execute a Purdue team led by Braden Smith for the most part. And I think that's why I lean towards this Purdue team. And I think it's a little bit more sizable than what you said. I think this Purdue team leads maybe wire to wire, maybe not exactly wire to wire, but I think this is like a comfortable 8-point win that Purdue's up 4 to 6 points almost the entire game, and I was just never really able to close that gap and close out the game.
It certainly could be. I mean, this is a big spot for Purdue. Um, you know, we've talked about this a lot. Purdue has the fifth hardest remaining schedule in the country. They have Iowa, and then after that's the big game against Michigan, which a loss there will all but officially eliminate Purdue from Big Ten title contention, whereas a win pulls them within one game of Michigan in that respect. And after that, it's Indiana, Michigan State, Ohio State, a bit of a reprieve against the Northwestern team that's been feisty lately, and then a season closing game against Wisconsin. So, from the Big Ten race perspective, Purdue essentially has to win out to feel really confident they're still in it. That's unlikely, but even from a seeding perspective, they're jockeying for a position on the 2 line right now. You lose to Iowa, all of a sudden you're probably back down on the 3 line. Like there's just a lot left to play out in a very top-heavy sport, and all of these games matter.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the seed jockeying for the seed line. Even if the Big Ten championship race feels not unattainable, because it's certainly still attainable, but the window's closing. Certainly, I think on that
Bit
opportunity
of a
to some
long shot.
extent, it is becoming much more of a long shot. This team could certainly still be a 1 seed come March, even if they don't win the Big Ten. I think even if they lose that Michigan game, if you go what would it be? I believe it would be 6-1 to close out the year. I believe there's 7 games left. If you go 6-1 with wins over Michigan State, Indiana, Iowa on the road, uh, Ohio State on the road, and your only loss is a close home loss to Michigan, I think you're still sitting there looking at a 26-5 record with a bunch of very, very high quality wins that would be potentially deserving of a 1 seed depending on what goes on around the rest of the country. I mean, the Big 12 certainly has a couple teams in contention, but they still have to play each other as well. And a lot could happen. So every game is important for Purdue, especially one that I do believe fits into the Quad 1A category. And we will be here to preview and recap them all. So make sure to tune into the recap for this Iowa game. It will be out shortly after that Saturday tip. And thanks for listening, everyone.